allows you to really talk the talk, but also articulate, kind of what they're seeing in the market, what the key challenges are, and why being part of this broader organization is really important. And here's the opportunity for you, and you're going to have fun doing it. And we can get you into a role that you like, because a lot of times the owner entrepreneur doesn't want to be doing the day-to-day administrative stuff anymore. He really likes selling, or he really likes R&D, or whatever the case would be. So the other kind of key thing for them, when you're talking to people is, what are you doing today versus what would you like to be doing?
Why did you start this company?
Yeah.
What do you love about
what would you like to be
industry?
doing? And maybe those two things are different, and that kind of takes the conversation in a different path. I've got another executive that I met through, I can't say this, George Jarrow, through a different networking group. But,
It's okay, because you're better, right?
That's right. And you know what he was actually doing was using his Rolodex, saying, okay, I've got these two companies. He was working with them as an advisor, but he was actually calling and getting business for these companies before he had even bought them. Trying to find a way. He was willing to open up his Rolodex and leverage that.
So pay forward, right?
Yeah, so you've got to be willing to invest not only your time, but kind of your contacts and everything else as you kind of go through this process. Because marathon, you're not going to call, the first company you call is not going to, unless you struck the lottery, the first one you call is not going to be the one that you're going to get to the end point with. So it's the persistence.
How many calls do you think once you make? 100?
If I just look at my add-on strategies where we're starting with the platform and we're not starting from scratch, I'd say we're probably 1 in 15 that we can kind of get to the end point. But we're starting with a known quantity, right? And somebody that is in the industry and everything else. So you're really honing in on kind of a pain point in the industry as to why you're embarking upon this thesis, and why bringing multiple companies together kind of makes sense and solves that issue.
And like you said, it's articulating your thesis in a concise way and very clearly.
Yeah.
That's important, because you have somebody on the phone with limited attention span, right? So what do you talk about for the first 2 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Sure. So when I think about executives, I like to think first, I want to make sure the experience of the executive is relatively similar in size of the company as the one that I want them to take charge of. I just think that if somebody, they can have a great resume where they've run a $300 million company, but if all of a sudden their resources are now at a $30 million level, it's a completely different experience, and they may not be used to having to roll up their sleeves and do the same amount, or more importantly, the team isn't going to be as capable under them as they're probably used to. So
was it your story where executive didn't have a trash can and he was looking for one? Or maybe it's somebody else's, it was another panelist.
No, but I can imagine
or
that
something
happening.
like that.
No,
He came in and there was no trash can, so he was waiting for somebody. He didn't even think about trying to get it himself.
That story is an even worse example. That shows a lot of other problems. But then I think so given that we're looking at smaller companies, I need to make sure that they're balanced executives, so that they know enough, either one, to know they don't know an area, so if they don't know manufacturing, they're willing to sort of get expertise, but they have enough knowledge of the different sectors that they can sort of participate. And usually I want someone that can, because on these smaller companies,
CEO,
yes,
right?
as a CEO, I want someone that, at the very least, I know if I'm going to put them in a meeting where hopefully I'm not putting them anywhere, they're finding the meeting, but they'll do well and show well and be able to talk effectively and sell. And then lastly, I think there's an underrated skill, and I've run into this in different forms, that I'd call empathy, and I think it's really important in my mind for our CEOs to have it, because it relates not just to understanding the customer, but also your internal team. And if you're not empathetic about what you're asking them to do or put them through, I think it's hard to be a leader, because you can drive them off real quickly, and then usually, again, in a small business, is you have these key people. If they leave, it can create a real negative domino effect, so.
Would the same be true empathy to the seller if you partnered with an executive with whom you're looking at companies together? That empathy toward a smaller business and owner risk?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in emotional IQ in everything. I mean, I think it's the key to what I do. I think it's the key to the team. I think I can't understate it. Matter of fact, we test for it.
You do?
We do. Not just empathy. We have
Is it a commercial test?
We have
or
a psychological profile test that we use on our key people it's not designed just for empathy, but it's sort of a balanced test that shows different strengths and weaknesses. So you can manage around some. I mean, nobody's perfect in everything, because somebody that's really strong in one area is going to be a little weaker in others. But I had, interestingly, I had one. We were searching for a CEO of one of our companies, and the person tested extremely high in aptitude, intelligence, driven, good track record. His empathy score was like 0. So I thought, this has to be a mistake. I mean, nobody's that unempathetic. So, this is before as I was developing my thesis, but we were thinking of overlooking it and talking about it internally, because we liked the guy. And right around the time we were going to make me an email that he's decided to back out. Just so I was thinking. So here I am thinking.
Without any consideration.
Without any consideration. Right, nothing. So I'm like, well.
Here you go. That was a good thing, though.
Yes, it was.
Any questions from the audience about this topic? Anybody, please?
So you just talked about in smaller businesses the importance of retaining key employees. In a lot of cases, those smaller companies, there's a lot of tribal knowledge. Do you typically utilize some sort of a retention bonus or something of that nature to make sure? And obviously, having the emotional IQ is a critical component. But there's still always some risk that somebody finds a different opportunity, or they're just nervous about the whole transaction.
You're talking about on the buy? I mean, if I'm going to buy, if the key people, well, what I typically do is, so if you would say, you tend to maybe have 3 key people. You got a salesperson, maybe the CFO, and maybe one other on the ops side. I will give them options in the business. If they are sophisticated enough, I may let them in and have capital even invest with us if they can pass the accredited investor test and the rules there. But that's how I do it, because paying them, I mean, they're going to have their own bonus plan at the company. If I were to just sort of give them cash to stay, that's not really the right, it would have to be part of either achievement or tying it to the performance of the business.
I guess one of the specific, I'm thinking about a specific example, and as part of a bigger public conglomerate, we acquired about a $12 million aerospace business. And the issue was the owner and the sales manager at the time were bought in. They got some incentives. There was a lot of tribal knowledge within the manufacturing process that wasn't documented. So there were some kind of key people in there that they were incentivized to stay on for 6 months and help us.
Yeah, we do that. I've done that, but I view that on the sell side, like where somebody's like if I were selling a portfolio company,
Yep.
I would then bonus the key people to stay in some form or do something in that sense. Or if I knew there was some sort of let's say someone wanted to retire, or there was some disruption in the business, or I were hiring someone new, I would be very transparent with the person and say, hey, I know you're retiring, or we're asking you to leave. I'll pay you for another 6 months if you'll stay on and help train the next person. So I think you got to be flexible in any case, in any business, and sort of work with the situation you're given.
Thank you, that's all.
Sure.
Well, it's almost 3 o'clock, but no one here to stop us, so we'll maybe go on. Anybody from Blackmore Connects here who's watching the time? Can you find out? Yeah. So I'll keep going, and please let us know. So post-acquisition then, what role executives play, and kind of maybe in the context of what do you do, what does the board do, and what do you expect from the, let's say, you partnered with an executive and that executive took a leadership role, could be CEO or another CEO role. So in this context, kind of three, maybe I'm missing something else, but you as an investor, board, and executive, what's the division of responsibility, accountability, starting with you, Jeff?
Sure. Thanks. So before we close, we have a value creation plan. We have a specific ideas what we're going to do with that business, that we work closely with our operating partner, executive, whatever you want to call that person. So really just post-closing, it's executing that plan. Some people call it a 100-day plan. I think there was some talk in the last panel about that, but that's really just the execution. It's fairly granular, and that's really led by the operating partner or executive that we work with. There's certain things that we may get involved with from the Geneva Glen side. Certainly, if there's key holes to fill within that company, executives, talent, we are very active in that. If they're C-level executives, they're going to report directly to the CEO, and that's typically working closely with either the CEO or the operating partner to vet a lot of executives that, because there's usually some augmentation or change required. More often than not, the CFO is upgraded just because it's usually a controller type person that's at the company and hasn't worked with banks extensively enough. So that's where we get involved. And then just from governance, we have quarterly board meetings, and then we do monthly operating calls. And the monthly operating calls are typically 45 minutes to an hour long of just how did the last month go, what's the current pulse on the business, how's it going. And then at the board meetings, it's all prospective, strategic. What are the opportunities and threats on the horizon? Maybe we'll do a deeper dive in a particular, a particular topic, like we need to open up a new facility, we need to relocate a facility. We think there's a big opportunity in productivity improvement with capital expenditures. So there's usually one or two topics that we'll dig in a little bit deeper because we're all together in the same room. So that's usually how we operate, and then we don't get involved very much beyond that, except to the extent there's either a refinancing or with add-on acquisitions, as was discussed before. If there's add-ons, then we do get very involved, particularly helping in sourcing those add-ons, as well as figuring out how to pay for them. Where's the capital going to come from? Being at those meetings with the owners to give credibility that we're going to be there.
Do you expect the CEO to be proactive with M&A, or this is more your responsibility to drive that?
It depends how integral that is to the business. I mean, I had a business where over the course of 13 years, we did 100 acquisitions. The CEO that's kind of how he's wired. He's closing almost like one a month, almost. So it's pretty intense. Other ones, it's more opportunistic. With our dessert business, we probably looked at 50 deals. We haven't closed one yet, but so I'd say our CEO there is really on the front line. It just depends on how integral that is to the overall strategy.
Thank you. Peter, in addition to answering the question in general, maybe you can talk about what it means for you to be transparent both ways with your executive team, or collaborative and transparent.
So I'd say, in general, kind of operating cadences, ours is very similar to Jeff. We're relying on the executive team to kind of derive strategy or drive the execution of the agreed upon strategy. We've got a scorecard that kind of outlines where we are versus where we want to get to, and every year we'll kind of evaluate how much progress we've made and what has changed in either the market or in what we've added to the company and may have to course correct. But again, kind of day to day, kind of on the team. We don't have operating partners. We do get together, twice a year with our CEOs and 9 of our former CEOs to kind of, share best practices, share, common knowledge, those types of things, but we don't have, people that go in and kind of work in the business every day, if you will. In terms of transparency, I'd say that, the number one thing is, private equity in general, and probably nobody likes surprises. So, when yeah, I mean, it's saying that, bad news doesn't age well. I mean, it just doesn't get any better, so you may as well lay it out there, because the sooner we know about it, the sooner we can devise a plan to deal with it. And whether that requires resources from us or outside resources or whatever the case may be, we just, if we don't know it, we can't help resolve it. So that's kind of the biggest thing, I would think.
And for you, an add-on to the question is that how do you deal with bad situations? So are you hands-on? Do you let your team solve it? How would you like your team to behave?
Yeah, I mean, so even in companies that are going well, there's always tough situations. It's just the nature of business, I think, that they ebb and flow. I think a lot of it depends upon the skill set of the CEO, how much I've come to trust them, and where the situation lies relative to their expertise. So like we've had in one of our companies a customer-based issue that was created before his time, where there was the sales team, who were not sophisticated, agreed to a bunch of contracts that were just horrible. The lead, I mean, he discovered this after we hired him. Interestingly enough, I called it the year of surprises, because after a professional CEO took over, it's like every month there'd be a new surprise of things.
Something.
Yes, he discovered
like
something.
Contract.
Yes, it was great. So not only bad news first, it was like bad news every month. But that was his role. We knew we were professionalizing a business that needed it. And so we stayed in touch regularly. I wasn't a micromanager, and I trusted his judgment. And he literally had to reopen a contract where we had no negotiating leverage. It was ironclad, bad contract, 5 years, somebody agreed to. And he just simply said to the bunch of the customers that, we can't honor this. And you would think, obviously, that could create an explosion. You can't do that, breach of contract, all that. And I trusted him to handle it. Obviously, what?
With empathy.
With empathy. Well, he had to. I mean, it was very touch and go, because you could see, I mean, if they wanted to, they could do all sorts of unfortunate things to us. But if to honor the contract, we would have been selling at a loss. So, I mean, that's just an example. I think, you always have to work through as a team, and every situation, maybe almost like a crisis PR firm, it needs a different approach and a different team, and you would assign a team to tackle it. And I try to be very sensitive to making sure I'm giving the CEO as much rein as possible, and they over time earn the right to get more of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did this particular executive, earn your trust? Was there something in particular he did, or just over time?
Well, this particular example, some of it was over time as far as judgment. In terms of credibility, he had an agreement for him to come in, and he found out when he went to give notice. He was working at a private equity firm at the time. When he went to give notice, they told him the company was for sale, and they hadn't told him yet, and he had options that he would have forfeited. And I told him that if he tells him and gives me his word that he's going to honor it and he'll come with me, I'll wait. So, I waited, and he honored what he said he would do, kept me, and not only that, I said, I'd love your help on his own time, come in and learn the business, and so he earned my trust that way, and we had a good relationship.
So we're done with time. There's a question. Do we have?
We're not going to have time.
Sorry.
You're going to have time to talk to these people. Okay,
Well, thank you so much.